Welcome everybody to Boston 9/11 Truth. Today is Thursday, September 19th, and we are very honored to welcome back Ted Walter from the International Center for 9/11 Justice. I'm just going to put his website on the screen. We'll bring it back up later. Where's my share screen? There it is. I don't see it. All right, we'll do that later. So Ted has been, he's the executive director, is that your title? Of the International Center for 9/11 Justice, and he's been instrumental in the UK case with Matt Campbell. And they've just filed their latest update. So Ted, why don't you take it away and tell us all about it?
Sure. Thanks, Susan. It's great to be here again. Great to see all of you. Always a pleasure to speak with you and work together with you on initiatives. Yeah. So one correction. They have not filed the judicial review case yet, or have not finished filing it yet. It's been a long slog because essentially the Campbell family and their lawyer have to put together an 8,500 page electronic document PDF with links to every single, with an index that links to every single document in the larger PDF. So essentially, we thought we'd be filing. I mean, it's been since April, really, but we expect to finish filing on Monday, and so this is like the first step in essentially, and there's not a name for this in the U.S., and I don't know if there's even an exact equivalent, but essentially they are seeking judicial review. They're challenging the legality of the Attorney General's decision to deny them a new inquest, or more specifically, to deny them the right or the power to apply to the High Court, which the High Court in the UK is the body that would actually order the new inquest and would quash the original inquest. So there's two hoops that they have to jump through. The second hoop is usually a formality, the hoop with the High Court. The first hoop is getting the Attorney General to say, yes, your case is legitimate. Right. And that's where they've been stopped for the last 3 years, is with the Attorney General. And so they're challenging the legality of the Attorney General's decision. Just to give like a larger view of what this is about, it's about Geoff Campbell. You mentioned Matt Campbell. He's the brother, and his whole family essentially formally 3 years ago filed an application with the Attorney General to reopen the inquest into his brother's death. His brother, Geoff Campbell, who was 31 years old and who died in the North Tower. He was on the 106th floor of the North Tower when it came down. And there was an inquest held for Geoff and 9 other British victims in 2013, which concluded for all of them. I'm not sure if all of them were in the North Tower, but essentially for all the victims who were in the Twin Towers, which might have been all of them, that the buildings came down because due to the airplane impact. And it was sort of a phrase in the official conclusion of cause of death that was it's almost odd that it was there, because there was not a minute spent at the inquest actually exploring the question of how did the towers come down, why did they come down, what actually caused this to happen. It was all very, very superficial, sort of rubber stamping of like key claims in the 9/11 Commission report, and there was actually no time spent looking at the actual collapses, and yet that showed up in the official conclusion regarding his death and 9 other British victims. So from the get-go, Matt Campbell, who he was not present at that inquest, but he basically soon after realized that he disagreed with the conclusion, and that there was actually a mechanism for him to challenge that conclusion and to open a new inquest. And so for many years, he was kind of working towards that, trying to gather up support, trying to raise funds to do it. And finally, 4 years ago, managed to raise the funds with the help of architects and engineers from 9/11 Truth. And at the time I was there, and so I was working with him and the family on it. And then the attorney general, so they filed the application in August of 2021, and the goal here is to get a new inquest to prove that the true cause of death is, and to establish legally that the true cause of death was the demolition of the North Tower, and not that the building came down due to the airplane hitting it. So, when we brought this to a barrister back in the summer of 2020, he basically looked at it and looked at all the evidence that we provided and was like, "Oh my God, this is in his view, was a slam dunk case to meet the threshold that is required for any family to be able to get a new inquest, which is that they just have to, there's a few different grounds that can apply, but the two that are being used in this case are, one, that there is new evidence that was not considered at the first inquest, and so we have thousands of pages of that evidence, and second, that there was not a sufficient inquiry conducted, and that, as I just mentioned, the coroner did not actually conduct a real investigation, or any, not even assertion as to what caused the building's collapse. So from the beginning, we felt like we had a strong case. Of course, from a legal standpoint, it seemed like a slam dunk. Of course, we know the politics of the situation is much more complicated, and is something which should be this simple to go forward. Are they really going to allow it to go forward? What are they going to do to stand in the way? And so that's what the last 3 years have basically been an experiment in, is what would the attorney general do to stop this from actually going forward? And so they sat on the application for 2 whole years. And then in July of last year, and I mean, that's a ridiculously long time given what was put before the attorney general. They did not need that amount of time. And it showed that they were just sitting on it and not doing anything, because they finally issued a decision last July, a little more than a year ago. And the decision was just utter nonsense, totally not using applying the legal test correctly. And just, I mean, I won't go into all the details, but it was, and some of you here might have read that letter from the attorney general that was issued a year ago. And so they've threatened to challenge judicially review that initial decision. And when they were about to file the application, the attorney general withdrew the decision, because the attorney general knew that it was indefensible. And so right there, they worked on it. They worked on this decision for 2 years, and suddenly they issue it. And then as soon as it's about to be challenged, they would withdraw it. So it's like basically proof about how absurd the decision is. And then we thought, oh, we got pretty optimistic at that point and thought, okay, maybe they're actually going to properly review the evidence and allow the inquest to go forward, because they withdrew the decision. And then, unfortunately, in early January this year, they issued a second decision, again denying the application, basically for the same reasons, but just slightly better written, slightly, making a slightly stronger case, but in essence, the same sort of excuses given. So I don't want to bore you all with the details of the process, but essentially where we're at now is they made an initial, they had 3 months to respond. The family had 3 months in which to file something to say we're challenging the decision of the attorney general that was issued on January 4th of this year. And they got in the initial filing in early April after spending like a month and a half or 2 months fundraising. And it's very expensive, unfortunately, very expensive process. The barristers who provide these kinds of legal services charge a lot. But managed to raise the money, managed to get the filing in before the deadline, and now have been, the barrister, his name is Nick Stanage, that they work with, is just very, very busy, and as many other cases that he's always working on all the time, and kind of knew that once we got the initial filing in, that there wasn't like a hard deadline in which to get in the rest of the actual 6,000 or what's turning out to be 8,500 pages of law and evidence and so on. But we're finally just about there, just about to cross the finish line. And so one interesting thing that happened, though, because of the delay is, and probably many of you will be aware that there was an election in the UK in July, a general election, and the government changed. And of course, I don't think that in this day and age, the Labour Party is any better than the Tories in most regards. Certainly not when it comes to issues of war and peace, or justice, or many other things. But simply on the basis that there is a new attorney general who took office in July, we were already hopeful that, again, when we did this imminent filing, that rather than go through the whole process of judicial review, which would be time consuming and potentially expensive, if the attorney general were to lose in the case, the Campbell family could actually make a claim to get all of their attorney fees reimbursed. And so with that threat looming for the attorney general, and just the indefensibility of the decision, we were still pretty optimistic of like, hey, once we actually file this judicial review application, maybe the attorney general will turn around and capitulate again, and this time actually allow the thing to go forward. I think the probability of that is even higher with a new attorney general in office. And unlike the last attorney general, her name was Victoria Prentice, who was a member of the Conservative Party. She's practically not even a legitimate lawyer, really, to be honest. And that's reflected in the decision that was issued. The new attorney general is actually a legitimate barrister. He actually used to work in the same chambers as the Campbell family's barrister, Nick Stanage. And if you actually do some research on him, his name is I'm going to get the name wrong. I think Richard Hermer. I think that's it. He actually has a pretty good stance in my view, on Palestine and Israel, and has written a lot of decisions for the British government, basically essentially advising that Israel's actions towards Palestine are illegal, and that Britain is at risk of violating international law in its support of Israel. But that's sort of besides the point. I'm not going to say this guy works for Keir Starmer. I'm not going to say he's necessarily going to do the right thing, but he's actually a real lawyer. And also, I mean, he will now be put in a position of having to defend the decision that was issued by the previous attorney general. And I don't think, our feeling is that he's not going to be very keen to do that, and that so there's an even better chance that the attorney general will just withdraw the decision, and at some point, maybe not immediately once they withdraw it, but at some point turn around and actually issue a new decision that is positive and allow the whole process to finally go forward. Now, again, you could accuse us of being sort of naively optimistic, but that's kind of what gives us the conviction to keep going forward. And if they don't withdraw it, then I think our view is that we still have a very good chance, not a 90% chance, but above 50-50 chance of actually prevailing in the judicial review process, because the decision is so clearly unlawful. So that's kind of it. So, and the important detail is that once it is filed, hopefully this coming Monday, the attorney general will have 3 weeks in which to respond. And so we should know within 3 weeks if they're going to capitulate or if they're actually going to fight this in court. And to get a little bit into the nitty gritty, and then I'll leave it at that and answer any questions you guys have. If there's one thing that maybe the attorney general has the best chance of winning on, it is whether the decisions issued by attorney generals in the UK are legally or judicially reviewable. There's a question as to whether their decisions should be subject to judicial review, or whether the courts have no purview to actually assess the legality of decisions by attorney generals. And so it's sort of a procedural, technical question. But the courts, there was a precedent set a few decades ago that said that attorney general decisions are not reviewable by the courts. However, there have been decisions since then that have sort of raised the question, and where the courts have basically said, well, this doesn't make any sense. That what if the attorney general does something that is clearly contrary to the law? How can there be no accountability whatsoever? So the court has been tending in the direction of that attorney general decisions are judicially reviewable in case they actually happen to be totally unlawful. And I think, as I mentioned before, this new attorney general, Richard Hermer, is a real lawyer. it's actually, although he will be now working for the British government, you'd almost be surprised to see a real attorney, a real lawyer want to set the precedent that, that attorney general decisions are not reviewable, because it's basically, it's bad for everybody. It basically just means there's no rule of law here. An attorney general can do whatever they want. So we're maybe hopeful that they won't actually try to use that argument if they go forward, although that's their best chance of winning if they decide to fight the decision. If we were to, one last point is, if we were to win at that technical question, there's two stages to the judicial review. There's the initial review to see if it's even a arguable case, and then there's the actual substantive hearing. And if we get past the first one and they say that it's essentially attorney general decisions are judicially reviewable, then it's also possible that the attorney general would withdraw the decision once it's actually going to be go to a substantive hearing and be judicially reviewed. So I hope that wasn't too much, and I also hope it's like fresh information for all of you. We might have been hearing the same thing for the last several months or the last year or so, but that's kind of where things stand. And we are, as I said, we're pretty optimistic, and we've been fortunately finally getting some real attention with the case. As you mentioned in the email bulletin, Susan, George Galloway interviewed me last Wednesday on September 11th. George Galloway is a prominent British politician and broadcaster. And then I did an interview with Neil Oliver, also very prominent British pundit and author and historian, on Sunday on GB News, and he has a show on GB News. So that's exactly the kind of attention and like support that we were hoping all along that this case would begin to garner in the British media, or at least alternative British media, and finally it is. And I think that's sort of a product of the fact that this issue is gaining ground in the general, in the court of public opinion, and especially in the alternative media. And so this whole thing is maybe coming at a really perfect time, when it'll actually get the attention that it deserves if the attorney general or the courts try to act in an inappropriate way. So
Thank you, Ted. Jean has hand raised, but I have a quick question first. 8,500 pages. That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, does it include forensic reports and things like that? Yeah,
it does. I think now with this bundle, I'm really guesstimating here, but I didn't do exact page counts, but probably like up to 1,000 pages of that is actual law. So it's law, setting case law, decisions from various courts, and then other things that relate to just the legal tests, things having to do with like coroners and instructions to coroners about how coroners are supposed to investigate deaths, etc. And then when you get into our evidence, which is 6 expert witness statements, 5 eyewitness statements from 5 eyewitnesses, and then probably 1,000 to 2,000 pages of other papers, reports, etc. So we did, and you've got like the University of Alaska Fairbanks report in there. You've got, and then what takes up a lot of it is actually various volumes of the NIST report, because any part of the NIST report that was cited in any of the expert witness statements, or in the part of what we did for the original bundle that was filed 3 years ago, was we basically said, we looked at all these different areas of evidence, and we said, here's all the literature support, having to do with, let's say, molten metal at ground zero. Here's all the literature that's arguing based on this evidence for controlled demolition. And then here's the literature that's addressing this evidence that's arguing against controlled demolition or arguing in favor of the official theory. And it's always scant. There's in terms of actual either academic papers or anything issued by NIST, you've got like a 500-word FAQ maybe. So you've got huge amounts of literature and reports and so on one side of any given piece of evidence, and you've got like an FAQ from NIST. And so there are places where we did cite the NIST report, or where some of the experts cited the NIST report in their testimonies, and any part of the NIST report that was cited, any volume of the NIST report that was cited, whether in our literature that we presented or if it was an expert witness, we were including that volume of the NIST report in the application. So that's what makes up a lot of the volume of the document.
And the Attorney General has 3 weeks to review the 8,500 pages.
Well, they had 3 years actually to review it.
Oh, okay.
None of this is new to them.
Okay.
This is all stuff that they should have been reviewing over the last 3 years.
Right.
The courts, that if this actually goes forward, the courts will have not a lot of time to go through all of this. But the part of the application is also there's a list of essential reading by the barrister includes in the documents. It basically says, okay, out of all this, here are the things that are essential reading.
Oh,
And yeah, and he gives like an estimated time of 2 days to read all of it,
right.
of the essential reading. So
Right. Wow. Okay, Jean.
It was actually me.
Okay. Well, you're
Um,
kind of the same now.
yeah, same last name anyway. I was going to ask, you mentioned there were 9 other people from the UK who's who had died in the towers, and so they all had that original inquest all at once at the same time. Did any of the others, that is Matt in contact with them? Are they not interested in pursuing this any further? Like, has he tried? I'm just curious if there's any relationship there.
Yeah, good question. He's in touch with a family, like a British family member group. And first of all, there was approximately like 66 British victims, but remains were only discovered for 10 of them. 10 out of the 6 were discovered and repatriated to the UK. And so they held inquests only for the ones whose remains were found and repatriated to the UK, which obviously tells you something, that remains for the great majority of them were never found.
Yeah.
But he did approach, so he put out a word to the entire family member group and didn't really get a response. He approached one family that he knew was quite open to the controlled demolition argument, and whose father was actually asking questions during the inquest about why there was 84% of his son's body was recovered, and only 2% of Geoff's body, for example, was recovered. And so he approached that family, and they were, at this point, these parents are pretty old, and they were just like, we don't want to get involved. Like, we support you, but we don't want to get involved. We're informally requesting the inquest. Now, if the inquest actually goes forward, there may be we could actually, Matt and Nick Standish, the barrister, could try to approach the families again and notify them, or even the court might do it. I'm not sure. And say, there is a new inquest being held for one of the victims. Would you like to be party to this as well?
Okay.
But that's a possibility. I would not be surprised if more families decided to participate if it actually went forward, whether because we reach out to them or because they're informed about it or they hear about it in the news or what have you.
After you guys did all the dirty work.
Right. But that's not, it's also, the important thing is that whether or not another family participates, it doesn't matter. Like, the Campbell family is entitled to this inquest. And even if it ends up the result that they want, and that is obviously the correct result, there's nothing that will necessarily trigger the other inquests to be reopened, or to be for the conclusions to be revised. But I think that you'll see a political sort of reaction to the inquest. If there was an inquest conclusion that says that the towers were brought down by controlled demolition, I think that obviously that's going to be a massive story in the UK and beyond. And I think so. A lot of families at that point then will actually say, yeah, we want our inquest reopened as well.
Yeah, this is like a 2-in-1, because you're looking for Matt's looking for justice for his brother, and that's the one big motivating thing. But then obviously, if this goes ahead, then what does it say? Then that opens the door to, it's like, if this court is actually considering controlled demolition, then, the other one, it kind of like puts the backs of the other ones against the wall. Like, they're going to have to do something with that.
Yeah. Now, who knows? You might get families saying like, "Oh, this is wrong. This is not true. The coroner is clearly biased or crazy," or who knows? Who knows what kind of, But I think a lot of families will take it seriously, and I think you'll get the same thing. That'll be a microcosm of the larger public response to it.
Right, but that's what I meant, like on a public level. Like, if the court in Great Britain is addressing controlled demolition, then what's the excuse for the court in New York, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's always been the hope, is that, I mean, obviously it is first, and for Matt and his family, it is very much about getting the true cause of Jeff's death revealed, but it's also for them as well as for us and for everyone who's supported this. I think we all recognize the potential, if it goes the right way, it will start a tidal wave of political action and awareness raising. I
like tidal wave.
Yeah. And now we know that we have some media, at least with big platforms, that are following it, that care, and that will get the word out and frame it and report on it in a truthful way when it comes, if things go well. So
very good. Thank you, Sandra, for your question. And Al has a question.
Yeah, Ted, you sort of took my subject matter and addressed it, but my question is, what say the case was won, and is there any assessment of damages that the Campbell family can collect, and would the British government be under any obligation to pursue it in the U.S. and would there be an extension of the outcome of the court case? And I mean, that what is the end game here, basically, or what could be accomplished, I guess, to make it even more exciting?
Yeah. So great question. There's no, I don't know that, I don't think that there's an equivalent for it in US law, other than perhaps a medical examiner or coroner issuing a report on the cause of someone's death. And then that would then be brought in as expert evidence in an actual proceeding, whether it's criminal proceeding or a civil proceeding. Similarly, but if that's what the coroner concludes in this case, nothing will actually be automatically triggered. Surprisingly, in a way, like you would think if the coroner says, "Oh, it was controlled demolition," then that would just essentially, prosecutors or the authorities in the UK would say, "Okay, well, we have to." That this automatically means that we have to investigate this, and there has to be some sort of criminal investigation and prosecution. But it doesn't necessarily mean that. I think in a case this big, what would likely happen, what could happen is that, and you've seen this in other things in Britain, and you see it like in the form of the 9/11 Commission in the US. Maybe before there's any sort of criminal proceeding, there might actually be like a new, sort of public inquiry, sort of similar to like the Bloody Sunday situation in Northern Ireland, or other similar kind of killings or mass casualty events. But the Campbell family could, I mean, I think it would be hard to sue somebody civilly because all that's happening is a coroner saying this is the proximate cause of death, and there probably won't be any conclusion as to who did it, right? That's not usually part of what's covered in an inquest. But my sense is that it's really more than anything will serve as a catalyst, but nothing is automatic. It'll be a catalyst because of the political ramifications of it, more so than because there's anything sort of legally triggered that must happen if that's what the coroner concludes.
Great.
Thank you.
And Chuck has his hand raised, or actually, Sandra, did you still have another question, or Jean?
Now it's my turn.
Jean, no.
Okay, go ahead.
What kind of costs are we looking at if this proceeds in the different routes? And two, if it does proceed to that, would Matt be looking to try to get some more big names in the media in the UK, like Galloway again, Russell Brand, or David Icke
Neil Oliver.
and Dale Oliver,
Neil
Oliver, yeah.
Yeah, there, you know, if the judicial review process continues, it will be expensive. There will be more fundraising that has to be done. Hopefully not, you know, it remains to be seen. It remains to be seen how much will need to be raised. You know, there is one there. Matt does have one backer who's able to provide a lot of the funds needed, although not all of it, but a substantial portion. So it's, you know, it could be challenging to come back, you know, yet again without too much progress being made legally and say, hey, we need to raise another large sum, you know. So I think we're hoping that if we need to raise any funds for the next stage, that it's small enough that just like one or two people with relatively deep pockets can support it. And then maybe if we get further along and there seems like there's light at the end of the tunnel, that it would be easier to go back and raise money publicly again if needed. But, you know, just kind of going step by step and hoping for the best right now, hoping that the Attorney General just immediately withdraws the decision.
And any quick comment on possibly seeing Brand again or David Icke? Or
right now, nothing, no news from, I mean, I know Matt went on Gareth Icke's show back in February, you know, David Icke's son.
Yes.
David Icke, I think he knows about the case. He's never really put much attention on it. You know, it would be some good, helpful exposure. Russell Brand has shown very little interest ever since I did my interview with him last October. He seems to be more preoccupied with like partisan politics right now.
Yeah,
in my view, than in anything having to do with 9/11 truth, unfortunately. So I'm not expecting, but I did email his assistant, but I'm not expecting Russell Brand to turn around and interview Matt anytime soon, unless maybe we get good news from the Attorney General and it's going to go forward. Then maybe, but I got the, you know, impression that George Galloway and Neil Oliver are going to continue to cover it, and who, you know, we'll see who else. You know, I think we're working with a good publicist in the UK who might be able to get the word out, and we might get some actual mainstream coverage even just with the filing of the application on Monday.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, and Chuck is next.
Hi, Ted. Nice to meet you.
Chuck.
I just read the Piers, Robinson, Piers and Kevin did the COVID 9/11 deep state deep structural event, which is important for something we talk about in the truth movement, to make that criticism that the 9/11 event was a deep structural event. But just to be clear, these were the families that didn't accept the settlement. Is that correct?
Yeah, so to be honest, I've never really discussed it with Matt, and I don't know if his family was offered any sort of settlement. He was engaged at the time. Geoff had just become engaged like in the month before 9/11. I don't know if his fiance was offered anything, or if she maybe wasn't because they weren't actually married. I don't know. Matt it's very important not very important, but just keep in mind with this process, this is not, again, suing somebody for damages. This is a process that is sort of it's like a separate judicial process in the UK that is triggered whenever there's an unusual death. And in the case of the 9/11 victims, it was triggered because their remains were repatriated to the UK. And so this is the inquest is guaranteed to happen when in this type of situation. And when there is a doubt about the conclusion of the inquest and the family has grounds to challenge the original inquest, they can do so. And anything that they might have, any agreement they might have signed or payout they might have gotten wouldn't apply to this.
Got you. This is a special legal window.
Yeah.
Through which an action is being taken. to get some political truth around the 9/11 event. Okay, I catch the drift. I miss, so they're exploiting an opportunity, and and I'll just say that, this truth movement, I mean, obviously we need to do so many things and work on so many levels and exploit these kinds of opportunities like is being done in the UK right now. I know there's someone who's advancing the idea that, Islamic or Arabic or Islamic countries, because the alleged attackers, the hijackers were all from Egypt and Saudi Arabia. So the Arabic countries have been impugned by the theory, the conspiracy theory that's the official narrative. So there's grounds for them to, sue or to conduct an international tribunal. And some people think that the only way we're going to get truth is outside of the United States, outside of the UK, outside of the Five Eyes, NATO, Atlantic kind of area. I'll just make an observation that I'm advancing a COVID protest project in Oregon, and it's ban the COVID vaccine mRNA on the grounds that it's not safe and effective, and that the technique is to send a letter to the health authority that says evidence is clear, it's not safe and effective. And we're giving you this truth in essence. And so now you have to do something. You are morally obliged to do something with that truth. Investigate it. Is it really true? And I say in the memo that the CDC is false and not giving true reports, and you're relying on fraudulent representations of what is, and So this is then leading to us, the activists, seeking a county district attorney, because the state attorney general is not going to touch this. They're an establishment. So Oregon's very blue, Dem state, very total deep state. So then the task is then to go to these conservative counties and find a deputy DA that would take the case and conduct the grand jury for COVID vaccines not safe and effective. People have been harmed, and we would have to bring someone forth, who's been harmed, and then they become. Then we add that. So now we have our public elected, financed people not conducting civil matters for us for civil justice, but actually conducting criminal. I mean, it's a tactic that Michael Diamond has kind of thought up, and he's over at the National American Renaissance Movement. So I just wanted to share that. I think the crime is in the cover-up, not necessarily. We don't have to say how anything happened, but I think the standing that they're just friggin' lying to us, and the lie is a full-on state crime, and so we speak frankly about, it's like, hey, I just saw that guy break into the house and steal, and he ran down the street. We would speak normally about witnessing a crime of that sort. Well, that's in effect what we are doing in our truth movement, I think. All right, nice to meet you.
Reaching
Yeah.
DAs, isn't that also the same method Vincent Bugliosi used with to prosecute Bush for murder?
Did he go to county DAs?
Yes.
Well, same principle, absolutely. And we're bearing witness. We see, and we collect, and the evidence is clear. It's beyond a doubt for me in the 9/11 event that and the evidence just piles up every day. So the problem, of course, is American public. We need to galvanize the American public, and so in closing, my final pitch is the notion that there should be an electoral block of political truthers that would just call this, say that and there's a rescue the Reclaim the Republic effort going on in DC this weekend to reclaim the Republic. So throughout our culture, there's this, in the ethos is an acknowledgement and awareness, a demand for accountability and awareness of the profound corruption. And that
Chuck, I don't want to interrupt, but you didn't know this, but Ted had a hard stop like 5 minutes ago.
2 minutes ago. 2 minutes ago.
Okay, so I came late, so nice to meet you.
Yeah, I know you didn't realize, but I just didn't want to put anybody in an awkward spot, and I just saw the clock
please.
ticking.
I get it. Absolutely. I'm nice to show.
Sandra. Yeah. Al has his hand raised, but I think we're out of time. Is it just 2 seconds or less, Al?
Yeah, a quick question. Have you ever reached out to Judge Napolitano or Jimmy Dore, these guys that have big followings, made them aware of the Campbell case?
Yeah, we are, you know, I have a colleague who has emails with Judge Napolitano and has made him aware of this case. Tried back in February when we were fundraising, and frankly, Judge Napolitano kind of declined at that time. But I think Napolitano would be more likely to do an interview about it now. Especially, you know, with the George Galloway and Neil Oliver interviews having happened. So yes, and yes to Jimmy Dore as well. And I think it's only a matter of time before Jimmy Dore has come a long way in terms of speaking out about 9/11. And so I think it's only a matter of time before, you know, Jimmy Dore is talking about 9/11, you know, full time and covering the Campbell case among other things. So yeah. But yeah, we are in touch with Jimmy Dore as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ted, for taking the time to speak with us and, you know, clarifying exactly what's going on. And so everyone, check ic911.org for updates. So hopefully we'll have an update within a few weeks.
Absolutely.
Could I make one comment to Ted?
Well, he does have.
I had an experience. Huh?
He
Go
does.
ahead.
Be quick. I had an experience with the Massachusetts Attorney General more than 3 decades ago, where there was an obvious severe crime, and I sent him letters and called him, went in to see him, and he decided, I guess, that it would be more politically advantageous for him to ignore me, and he did quite a bit, hoping, you know, to go for a higher office, I guess. And so I was impressed by the terrible corruption in the Attorney General's office at that time. But then later, people told me, well, you should have gone to the federal attorney, or you should have gone to the district attorney, or there was one other. And I just assumed that, oh, there's a major crime, you go to the Attorney General. And in that case, in my case, it wasn't true.
Yeah, I hear you. There's definitely reason for skepticism in most situations, you know, most situations where there's a legal and political dimension. I think, you know, this is a very particular process, and the Attorney General actually really did not have the discretion. This is not a discretionary matter in which the Attorney General like denied the family's application. Like, we can demonstrate that the Attorney General clearly broke the law. And so hopefully the Attorney General will either see that and realize that they don't have a chance and they will choose not to defend it, or hopefully the High Court in the UK will actually do the right thing. But there's certainly no guarantee that the High Court will do the right thing. So it is a challenge, but similar to what you found. All right, thanks everybody. I'm going to sign off. It was a pleasure to see you all.
Thanks so much, Ted. Thank you
so much. All right. Well, I guess we'll start recording because we generally just record for the speaker, unless people have comments that they didn't get a chance to say about Ted Walter and International Center for 9/11 Justice and the Matt Campbell case. Okay. So I think that was an excellent, short but sweet, very sweet presentation. And from here, we'll go on to the agenda items. I'm going to start.